We're entering now into the third day of fighting in the Zone 5 battles, where 846 is fighting 1302 and also 2327 with this insane fort wall. And we're on the third day of fighting in this zone over here with 525 and 945. So I want to give you an update on how it's going and what's happened. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming and today's video is sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms. And over 20,000 people have already watched yesterday's update video about what's happening in this KVK. So I thought I'd bring you a Mother's Day update. Happy Mother's Day everybody, and hopefully you'll be spending some time with your mother today. Take advantage of the time that you have with your parents. Trust me, it's precious and time is limited. But okay, that said, how's this KVK going? That's what you're here for. I want to show you this part of the map, okay? And if you've been tuning into my live stream or my last update video, you know that this insane fort wall was built, and I speculated that it could last the necessary 10 days for 1302 and their war camp to enter into the Isle de France zone over here. But that's a long time. And let me show you what 846 has done very well to limit the time that it's going to be sustainable to hold these forts. And the trick that they're using is basically to drop a fort. Now, why is that? You see, they've got this fort over here. It's currently burning, but that doesn't really matter at all. The value, the purpose of this fort is to reach far enough back that now they cannot back fort in the same way that they could before. You see, the goal of this fort defense is to have a forward fort that takes all the heat and then a back fort that basically makes it so that the enemy can only get 1 or 2 columns of progress at most toward their objective. That's what you're trying to do. And then you just keep back building a new fort behind the previous, making it so that it's just very, very, very slow going. Okay, so why am I telling you all this? Because 846 is very intelligently dropping a fort that has the ability to sort of reach over the top here. The folks in 1302 need to build their backup forts further back so that they cannot be touched at the same time. That's my understanding of kind of how this is going down. And so you can see their back fort is now much further back to sit at the corner over here with the territory of this fort provided by 846. Now, when, this fort is destroyed, then the new fort will, in fact, be sort of in contact with the fort that they created in 846. So, very smart play by 846 to reduce the amount of time necessary to crank through the fort wall and to get to this pass. Now, if 846 can continue to push forward through this area, once they get control of the top, they can then sweep down through here and clean up everything else. And you can see already that 1302 has had to build a buffer fort over here, which is in fact somehow already burning, which is an error, I believe. Like someone friendly fired their own fort and they're going to need to repair this. Hello? You guys should repair this. I don't think they should be able to burn this at all. This is literally friendly fire, and someone just needs to join the alliance, be an officer, and hit repair. And I'm pretty sure they'll do that soon. I hope. Please notice this. Please notice this. Anyways, the purpose of this fort is to prevent it so that when 846 cleans up this territory and ultimately starts to push down, that they can't just push into some flags over here. And that is because these walls are holding better than the top wall. And I think it's obvious why that's the case, okay? Let me explain. What 846 wants to do is cut through any one section of this wall. Ideally, they would cut through the top portion and then they just sweep down through everything else. That gets them the closest to the pass anyways. They really want to get to this pass. So, because the front wall is holding better than this top wall is, all right? This one is holding longer. They haven't backforted enough yet, so this buffer fort makes it so that in a worst-case scenario for 1302, if somehow these forts are lost and these front forts are still chilling, They don't have to surrender these front forts. They could even just let them free burn for a bit until they back fort more, and it would cover this sort of passageway down through here. That's my impression of kind of what's going on, all right? Now, overall, I think 846 is moving on at a very fine pace here. And 1302 is, I mean, I would assume, burning through their farms to kill off their farm troops, and just spam filling these forts as best as they can. And we kind of knew going into this fight that although both of these kingdoms are Imperiums, the 846 kingdom is still a very, very, very large kingdom. And I think that showed in their sort of total kill point scores, if I'm remembering correctly, and also their total power. Now, all of that said, this part of the battlefield is simply going to take days to sort of evolve, all right? For now, we can look to the other side of the battlefield where things have evolved, I think, a good bit faster. And as I mentioned in my last video, there wasn't really as much opportunity here for 945 to create this same sort of a fort defense because there wasn't as clean of a pocket of land to back fort into. And so what that allowed is for 525 to really clean up those forts, clean up the associated flags, and a lot of this yellow territory that you see is 525 cruising on through and burning lots of stuff. I think it was a very good play for 945 to come into this zone, and I mentioned in the last video, I undervalued how important that would be to just leverage forts, fill with farms, kill off troops very opportunistically, and to get some, hopefully, positive trades. And I would assume that's kind of what they've tried to do in this zone. They are still fort blocking access to this level 5 pass, but it does look like a little flag line has sort of skirted behind that. It's a fort that's skirted behind there. Interesting. The ELI fort. And there is still obviously a lot of fighting going on. So, I think if you're a 945, like you take the opportunistic fights, try to get some good trades here. And I think if you're not getting good trades, at some point you pull from the zone. A 945 will ultimately make their way into Anjou. You can see, by the way, they haven't done any of that yet, which I think is very commendable. They haven't taken these passes yet. They're just fully focused on the zone. They'll get to these passes eventually. They go on into Anjou, and presumably they'll have some land over here. Kind of an interesting design of the territory, but presumably they'll have some land by these level 5 passes, and they'll be able to push in via Anjou. And the thing is that 945 can't afford to get locked, so they need to defend Anjou. 365 would want to defend with them, or at some point they're basically ceding, their ally getting locked, which is not a great situation. So we'll ultimately see how much 365 splits their attention between going into Anjou and the other zone they have here, going into Berry. You can see they're already in Berry, and they've got some good land carved out over here. And they basically have fort blocked, and we're in the process of fort blocking 1302 from making a decision to come into this zone. So if 1302 does get locked, what will their options ultimately be? It will be either fighting 846 in Nevers or 365 in Berry. My assumption would be that unless there was just a really good way for them to enter Berry, which, in 10 days, I doubt that will be the case, they probably want to end up pushing into Nevers again if they were to get locked out. While, 254 is fighting 846, because, 846 will already have been weakened a bit. They would be distracted, presumably fighting, 1254, and there may be an opportunity to get back into the zone. But you can see that 846 is not going to slack when it comes to buffering off and blocking off this sort of pass. So my expectation is that both of these zones will have no fort drop opportunities, that both of these zones will be really heavily defended, and the only way for 1302 to get out of here, if they get locked, is going to be multiple days of burning forts. And that's, what a standard, lock-in for a kingdom ultimately looks like, right? So it'll be very interesting to see how this holds over the coming days. Subscribe if you haven't already to make sure you get updates onto what's going here. I think from what I've seen, both sides are playing this really intelligently, and I think the sort of biggest opportunity, the biggest learning I took from this zone, because I would have made this mistake, is that when you see an enemy build a wall of forts, a row of forts like this, and you realize that there's a pocket with a pass, you've got to start a fort yourself behind the lines the same time these other forts started. And that just gives you so much opportunity, I think. That's my biggest takeaway from this zone. So big thank you to 846 and also 1302 for honestly teaching me a lot. I mean, the way that 1302 approached this zone, by basically bluffing an entry into the zone, leveraging that opportunity to just stall and take out some forts, right? At least one fort anyways. And then revealing that their actual plan is to sort of hold up here. I learned a lot about that. And I think this move over here with the forts is also really, really critical. And look, I think the reality is that we should expect to see more tactics like what 1302 did here. I feel like they honestly just wrote the playbook on how to handle this pocket. I mean, this is just really magnificent. And there probably are other pockets just like that in other KVK maps where people are now going to be looking for exactly this. But if you want to see what things looked like yesterday, or if you want to see the pass opening itself, cards will be in the end screen for that in just a second.